educators apparently always annoyingly ask, but what about socialisation? Except, well, I've never been asked it, and maybe, just maybe, it's a question we should be asking ourselves first. Don't get me wrong, I believe socialisation, real genuine friendships are more than possible when you home educate. In fact, it's my personal belief that home educators have a particular potential for building really meaningful communities, but that doesn't mean it's easy. There's a growing number of voices opening up about how socialisation is really hard and in fact seems impossible for some home educators. So even though it's the dreaded question that we often get from people that don't support us, or maybe because it is, it's time to be really honest. Sometimes socialisation is the worst. But before we get into that, and don't worry, we definitely will, let's define the terms, because then, at least if you disagree with me, we know what we're arguing about. So for me, socialisation has a few different facets or levels, I guess. So the first level would be just interacting with other human beings regularly. That makes sense. Second one would be interacting with a diverse group of humans regularly. Then for me, it builds up to having friendships with a diverse group of people. Next would be building community. So I guess how I see that differently is you can have friendship one-on-one with somebody, but when you start to be in a community with people, there's a bit of interconnectedness between different people. There's kind of living life together a bit more. And then to me, the kind of pinnacle of what I would want for socialisation is building community with a diverse group of people that impacts the wide world. So it's not just an inward friendship, it's something that outworks into the rest of the world. I think that will be, for many of us who home educate, be something that was really important to us. But that's a big ask, and that's not just for us, that's for our kids too. So there's no wonder that it seems impossible. I think when people are talking about socialisation being easy for home educators, or very natural, I think they're talking about those first two levels of that kind of hierarchy. There's interacting with people and interacting with lots of different people regularly. That is fairly easy for us as home educators to facilitate. We're getting on the bus, we're going to museums, we're going to libraries, we're going to community events. There's a lot of different ages that we're interacting with, and that's fairly easy to tick the box off. But if we're talking about those next few levels, about having meaningful connections with people, we have to admit that that's really tricky. There are so many moving parts and variables that are out of our control. First, you've got to find people to interact with, ideally home educators, and depending on where you live, that can be almost impossible. Then if you do find people, first of all, you need to figure out whether they want to interact back with you, whether you even like them, whether your kids like their kids and their kids like your kids, and then whether you're free on the same day. That's only the surface level as well of interaction. Let's throw in neurodivergency, social anxiety, lack of accessibility. What else? Let's see. Kids' behaviour and what different people expect of that. We've got politics, we've got race and class divides, we've got all the different ages and stages of children, and then we've got the long-term effects of lockdown for the past 2 years. And then you throw it in a healthy sprinkling of small talk, and then, yeah, sometimes socialisation is the worst. Now, anyone that's known me for a while will have heard this story before, so I apologise, but I do like to bring it out every once in a while to prove my point about community. So, quite a while ago, I was in a community of, I consider them friends, definitely more than acquaintances, and we were all young mothers, and we were talking about parenting, and I started to share about some of what I considered the normal difficulties of parenting, the lack of sleep, the anxiety, the isolation you can sometimes feel. And when I finished talking, there was this silence. And I thought, oh, I've maybe touched some of these people's hearts and they're going to connect back with me. And one of them opened their mouth and said, well, I find it easy. And then someone else said, well, yeah, the thing I find hard, and I'm like, yes, they're going to say something. The thing I find hard is how much time I have on my hands. And I was gobsmacked. And it took me a while to find a community that would be the people who'd respond with, yeah, me too, or yeah, that's really hard, let's put the kettle on and have another cuppa. How do we find community like that? I wish I had an easy answer. So all I can do right now is remind myself of some of the things that have helped me during those lonelier times and put it out there on the internet in case it's of help to anybody else. Firstly, it takes time, and isn't that like the worst thing you want to hear when you're going through something difficult, that it takes time? But it does, time and patience. And I think I need to remind myself that I'm in home ed for the long haul. Like, this isn't something that's going to be figured out in 6 weeks. It's just not. And it's not going to be a linear journey to build community. It's going to take time. I was thinking about it and thinking like it's more like a nature hike with a toddler than a park run. Like, if you're not stopping and having a pocket full of stones and an armful of sticks at the end of your walk, then like you're doing it wrong. And I think it's a bit like that with building friendships and community. It's going to be a meandering journey, and just so you know, you are not alone in that. It can be easy to think everyone's hanging out without us, but they're not. They're all kind of in the same boat. We're all trying to figure this out at the same time, and it takes time. And if you want any kind of meaningful community, you have to be in it for the long haul. The next thing I have to remind myself is that it takes bravery. I don't like that answer either because I definitely don't always feel brave. And when you're having to be brave for yourself and for your kids, that can be hard. But bravery looks completely different for everybody at different times. So it might be being brave enough to step into that cold church hall and make eye contact with someone at a home ed meetup and have that awkward conversation. That's definitely bravery. Or it could be being brave enough to be the first person to answer honestly when someone asks how your morning has been, and to be like, yep, it was terrible. That's bravery. It might also be starting your own groups maybe. Or it could be a completely different type of bravery. It could be being brave enough to say no to the stereotypical socialization and investing in the different ways that might look for you and your family, and just maybe the meeting with one family once a week or once a fortnight and just not stressing out about the rest. Or it could be being brave enough to say yes if someone offers help or asks if you need help. It also takes creativity. For me, online was a perfect place to start with building community. It was meeting other parents there and other home educators that answered honestly when you asked them how they were. And it was also volunteering at different events and figuring out that one way that I connect with people is by doing things alongside them. And that was a really great way for me to be able to connect with other people. It was researching every single free community event in a walkable distance and just doggedly going to them and seeing what was there. And eventually I found that the more things that we went to, the more diverse events that we went to, the more connections we made. And weirdly, all those kind of connections started to interact, and suddenly I was in community before I'd even realized it. But the main thing that I need to remind myself in those lonelier times is that, yeah, well, sometimes socialization is just the worst. It's not meant to be easy. It's not meant to look a certain way. It's not meant to follow like a simple 1, 2, 3 formula, because socialization is to do with people, and people are complicated. So yeah, I throw out those pat answers if someone asks me, but what about socialization? But I do think it deserves the time for me to really think, yeah, so what about socialization? I would love to know what you think about building community and meaningful community as home educators for ourselves as parents and also for our kids. Am I overthinking it? Is it far easier than I'm making out? Is it just to do with personalities? I don't know. I feel like there are so many different ways that this kind of honest conversation can go. So definitely join us in our Facebook group to talk about it, or put some comments down below, and I would really love to talk to you more about this.